Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Laura.
Hi, hello.
Happy Wednesday. Happy Lunch and Learn Day.
Yeah, thank you to you too. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Obviously, I know some of the backstory about you being here, so I can only thank you enough. We'll
Yeah,
see if this comes up as part of the conversation. But yeah, excited. Anyone joining us, get yourself comfortable. You know the drill. I'm gonna an eye on the chat if you need to say hi, pop up some questions. Exciting topic, exciting questions that we need to talk together. But before we do that, would that be okay to share more about yourself?
yeah, absolutely. So my name's Laura Parr, and I'm a business coach. I specialise in dealing with mainly women that I work with, actually, and I specialise in conscious businesses. So for me, that has a sort of dual definition. A conscious business is either for me something that you start with the intention of not just making money, but also doing some good, giving back, be it socially, be it environmentally, something like that. So I work with a lot of women to incorporate aspects of that into their business. And the other side of it is being conscious about actually how you set the business up and how you run it. Because I think a lot of people start businesses that ultimately they don't really ask the pertinent questions when you first start, and that's how you get business failures, because it doesn't like fit with your life, or you haven't really done the deep analysis to work out if the business actually works for you. A lot of people come up with an idea and go, oh great, and then they run with it. And it's about being conscious about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, why are you starting the business, just to try and increase the success rate of businesses, really, which seems to be working very well. So that's me and what I do, really.
Oh, exciting. I feel like it's pretty much the same mission that I have, but we see it's very much on the career side of things holistically. So that's not necessarily meaning entrepreneurs per se, but it looks like the core of what you do definitely involves tapping into things such as finding your purpose. I'm assuming happiness as well is a very big thing. So, yeah, I mean, the first question I have is what made you go and work into that space?
For me, my journey, my previous sort of career, I ran a property business for well over a decade, and I got into it because I love property, and but I didn't do exactly what I'm sort of now teaching. So I've sort of learned from my own lessons, I suppose. I didn't ask the pertinent questions, and I didn't really, property is a big overarching term. There are lots of different facets to property, and I ultimately ended up in the wrong one for me. And by the end of it, I hated it. I absolutely hated every second of it. And it forced me, I've now sold the business, and this is what I'm doing full time, but it forced me to kind of go through that set of questions myself and sort of say, well, what do I want to do? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What's important to me? And so I did my own kind of set of self-discovery and learning, and ultimately I realized I love helping people. I love working with people, face to face, albeit via Zoom and so forth as well, but I love actually working with people. I've always loved business. I think it's brilliant. And I've always loved as well the idea of trying to do better and sort of helping the world. And I know everyone sort of says, oh, one person can't save the world. And yes, it might feel that way, but for me, what I do is almost like my ultimate leverage. It's my purpose, because the more people I help to start businesses that do good, the more help I'm giving, in lots of different areas. So that for me is far more important, I think. And it's it means that I actually get up and I actually enjoy what I do now, which I definitely didn't before, for sure.
Love it. And I think you've just mentioned how you ended up where you are today, which is, like you said, you've asked yourself the deep questions. And I feel like, some people definitely know that they're not necessarily where they're meant to be, but they're not sure how to, tackle this. I feel like you said, just tapping into what is it that I care about? What is it I'm passionate about? What is it that would want to make me wake up every day? Seems that you definitely find yours.
Yeah.
I just want to dive now into your expertise, which, like you said, is about conscious businesses. So, can you tell us more about what that means? You gave us a brief intro, but I just want to unpack this for anyone who doesn't necessarily is familiar with the subject.
Yeah, sure. There's lots of different ways that you can make a business more conscious. A lot of people, I think, when they're starting businesses, they sort of see philanthropy as something that you can only do when you have money. So it becomes something that, I'll do later down the line, but right now I have to make money. And I have to, and I get that, because obviously, you've got school bills to pay, or you've got mortgages to pay, bills, etc., etc. So money is definitely important, but people put off the ability to give until they've made it, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
But the big question is, well, what does made it mean? And for a lot of people, that's very, very different. But there are loads of things that you can do, even if you don't have money, to ultimately be philanthropic. So there are ways that you can work with your business, and it might be things like, the suppliers that you use. So there's a company, probably people have heard of it. It's Tony's Chocolonely, which is like a chocolate company, basically big chunky chocolate bars. They're delicious.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And they are specifically about making brilliant chocolate, but at the same time, they're about eradicating slavery within the cocoa trade, which is still very much prevalent. Which again, so part of what they're doing is, number one, using the right suppliers, but also being very vocal about it and trying to teach people. Like, I didn't realize that any of this was happening until I started understanding, what they were doing and why they were doing it. I read their website and so forth. And now for them, it's not just, buy some chocolate. It's buy some chocolate, do some good, and learn about what it is that's the problem. Because a lot of the time we're not really aware of these things. So that is a way that they have used, sort of a way to be philanthropic without actually just shoving money at the problem. There are loads of other companies that do sort of similar things. So it might be that you're using raw materials that would otherwise have gone to landfill. So there's another company called Elvis and Cressy, and they make high-end bags. And they do, I think, sort of other things now as well. They've expanded their thing, but they started with bags, and they're gorgeous. They look like beautiful leather, high-end luxury bags, and they are luxury because they're about sort of 350, 400 quid a bag. But they're made from old fire hoses that have just been discarded because they're.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah, which is brilliant. And it's something that, again, they would just sit there in landfill. They'd sort of rot away. They wouldn't really do anything, no purpose whatsoever. And they've just been reused. So there are plenty of companies that do stuff like that. It could be the way that you employ people. There's a couple of cafes, for example. One cafe in particular, they actually grind their beans within prison walls. And they train prisoners up as to how to sort of, grind the coffee, how to mix the coffee, how to make the coffee, all those sorts of different things, so that they are prepped for when they're on parole or when they're able to come out, and they have a job ready and lined up for them. So they have a skill, they have, work that they can go straight to, and the entire cafe is run by ex-cons. There's a cleaning company that does very similar. It takes, women that are at danger of abusive partners and things like that, people that have got criminal pasts, and obviously everyone's checked and trained and all those sorts of different things, but they're specifically trying to provide jobs for people who maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to get jobs themselves. So these are just a few little examples as to how you can incorporate something like that into your company, and it doesn't have to affect profits or the way that you run the company. It doesn't have to be a registered CIC, for example, or as a social enterprise. So there's loads of different ways that people can think about that, because I think, again, one of the misconceptions that I know that I've seen people have when I've been talking to them is that you can either do good or make serious money in business. And actually, that's not true. You could make millions if you want to, but that doesn't stop you from doing some of the things that I've just talked about.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what today's topic is about, right? The whole choosing happiness over money, or the relationship between those two. But like you say, they actually don't have to be one or the other. This is something that I just want to unpack with you. I'm sure you've seen that with the work that you do. I'm sure a lot of potentially entrepreneurs comes to you and be like, yes, I know I want to do good, but I also am conscious of generating money or whatever that is. What's your views when it comes to happiness versus money? Because just to give you some additional context, obviously we'll see how it works with yours, as in your work. But with mine, I know I got a lot of clients that I work with who feel stuck because they are at a certain level in their career. They've achieved a certain amount of salary and responsibilities, and they just feel like something else speaks to their heart, but they're just really worried about the hit they're going to take financially or the impact it's going to get. So a big loaded question and topic, but I think we've got some time to unpack this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is something, isn't it, that it's a big topic, and it's one that we could probably talk for hours on, because there are so many different little facets to it. But ultimately, for me, I think happiness is more important than money by a long way, but that doesn't mean that money isn't important. So I think where the issue lies is when people go into something with the prestige and the money as the forefront. So, and I did the same thing. I followed the money. The area of property that I got into was really easy for me to replicate. It was really easy for me to create scale. So ultimately, I could see the money. I could see where the money was going. But the actual day-to-day work, I hated it, like with a fiery passion by the end of it. Now, to me, there is no amount of money that is worth waking up and spending your entire life doing something that just fills you with dread every single day. Now, I know that some people don't have it quite that bad. Some people are just a little bit inconvenienced by their job, or they're, like you say, they get to a point where they just go, I feel like I've made it. And that's what they've been promised. And again, you see this with bankers and lawyers and so forth. They're like, I just need to pass the bar. I just need to, get to whatever position it is, partner in, this particular firm. And that's it. I'll have, completed my dream. And then they get there and they go, oh, okay, well, what do I do now? And was that it? And then they actually that's when you start to reflect and start to think, well, do I enjoy what I'm doing? And does this job fulfill me as a person? And a lot of the time when it's money that you followed because of, the fact that banking, being a lawyer, all those sorts of different things are high end and high prestige, and people kind of swoon a little bit when they hear it. But ultimately, if that's not you and that's not what you want, is it really the right
so far you can take it? Yeah.
And this is the problem, is that a lot of people, maybe I always sort of say like, a binman versus a banker. People will choose banker over binman because it's a banker and they get to say to people, I'm a banker, and doesn't that make me look awesome? And obviously you get a lot more money for it. But actually, they did a study and actually think about it, not binmen, but farmers came out the happiest of all of the professions, because it's outdoors, it's working with your hands, being in nature.
Being in nature, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the worst were bankers, lawyers, dentists, all those sorts of different things, because it's so high pressure. You give your life up pretty much to do those kind of jobs. And I came from a background of consulting, which was in a high-end firm in London. And they expect you to, they say 9 to 5, but then of course, if a client needs something on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, then that's your job.
You have to deliver. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think that if you go into something that you truly love and you understand that that's where your passion is, but you also want to make a load of money from it, that's great. That's absolutely fine. And it's just about asking yourself the question, why do you need that much money? Like if someone came to me and said, I need £1 million from, this job or this business that I'm going to create, my first question would be like, that's absolutely fine, but why do you need the million? What is it for? And if it's things like, cars and houses and holidays and all these sorts of different things, again, why? And it's sort of going back down, and the psychology of it is, are you doing that to fill a need within you that is lacking? Or is it truly and utterly 100% for yourself because that's actually what you want? And 99 times out of 100, it's the former. And it's trying to work out why.
I think the topic that we're covering together is very much linked to external pressure in a way, like earning a certain amount of money, or like you were saying, having a certain job role or job title that you can just, talk out loud with. Those are like, I don't know how you call that, maybe society constraint for lack of a better word, but essentially, like you said, it's really interesting the last point you've made, because I feel like this is also something we need to talk about as part of this theme in June, being about owning your worth. Well, knowing your worth is also knowing about when you're actually lying to yourself, or like you were saying, going at the deep roots of like, what are the actual motivations behind the whole I need to earn X amount of money. I know what you're sharing resonates with me on a personal level, because I went against all odds, still paying my student loan, couple of years down the line or up the line of the ladder in the corporate world, and I just ditched everything to start my business from scratch. All my friends were starting to earn good money, starting the whole like traveling, things like that. I was like, I'm gonna eat pasta tonight. It's gonna be amazing. And so I think back then the rationale was, I know I'm going to take a hit financially, but the meaning that I will get from doing this is a bigger thing. But I know for some people it's not as easy as that. I know not everybody functions the same way, and this is just my personal story and the drive I had. I think the one thing I need to ask you is, for the people who know there is something else better that awaits that will bring them more happiness, more purpose, but they feel hold back and they don't necessarily know how to entangle it, because even asking the question, well, if it's not that, what is it that you want to do? They're just not sure, like they're completely lost.
Yeah.
What would you advise them to do to get started and entangle the whole piece?
Absolutely. A lot of it is thinking it through and talking it through. So the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more exercises you do, the more things like this that you listen to, you start to understand a little bit more about what resonates with you, and what you find important. You know, the books that you're reading, the people you surround yourself by, it's all part of the journey to figure out what it is that you want. There are a couple of things that I do with my clients. For example, when I first start, a very simple values exercise is always a really good one. It's so simple, but yet nobody really seems to have done it. And it is quite literally just working out what your top 3 values are in life. Because a lot of the time, and the way that you do that is by noticing how you're reacting, for example, to you know, things that happen. So someone says something and you get really angry. Be conscious enough to ask yourself the question, why did I get angry? What was it about that situation that angered me? And I think herein lies the bit, you know, where it sounds very simple, but it gets a little bit more complicated, is that people need to be willing enough to be self-critical, because a lot of the time we jump straight in. We don't like being wrong, right? So if there's an argument happening, you know, we jump straight in with, well, that's not my fault, you know, and you should have done this first, without sort of sitting back and saying, actually, did I make a mistake there? Could I have done something better? You know, is there something that is, you know, not wrong with me, because there's never anything wrong, but is there something that I could maybe improve in some way? And being able to be that self-conscious, or not self-conscious, but more conscious about what you have to improve on, the better you're going to be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just being self-aware, and being very present in the situation. And like I say, I come back to the word conscious all the time, but this is why I you know, made it my business name, because being conscious is so important to understanding who you are and what it is that you want as well. So understanding your values, being conscious about what it is that that you're not so sure about, but also that you are sure about as well. And then doing an exercise as well. There's one I love, and this is a really fun exercise. It's called Rich Life. And it's literally putting the business to the side for a second. You know, even if you've got a bit of a business idea, forget that and just think about yourself for a minute. And it's literally working out what you would want in your rich life. And I go really deep with my clients, because it's, you probably can guess by some of the things I've said, I like to be very specific. So if they sort of said, oh, you know, I'd love to travel, you go, great, where,
how long,
how are you getting there? Exactly. You know, even if they say, oh, well, by plane, it's like, okay, but are you in first class? Are you in economy? You know, did you book your tickets? Did somebody else book your tickets? Have you got an assistant? Where did you wake up? Who's bringing you coffee? Are you making your own? Like, you suddenly start to realize, by going deeper and deeper and deeper, what kind of a life you want to live, because that's quite important then, to be able to know, if you are starting a business, whether your business is going to fit the lifestyle that you want as well. So it's exercises like this, and just getting to know yourself on a much, much deeper level, that allow you to realize what's important to you, and also what's not. And being able to sort of set aside stuff and know that it's your decision to say yes to that or no to that, and not somebody else's, because that's, again, societal pressure, like you mentioned earlier. You know, a lot of people, I find, get into their industries because maybe mum or dad pushed them and said, well, that's what you should be doing, or, you know, you're smarter than this, you should be doing this, or they don't want to be the only one of their friends that goes off and does something that, you know, their friends are not doing. So they feel a bit pressured to pick a certain path. So it's the same when it comes to answering the questions. You know, I had a client recently who said, oh, I want to retire at 60, not 65. And I said, why not 50? Because they were in their 30s. I said, why not 50? Why not 45? But they picked 60 because the societal norm is you retire at 65, and they thought, well, 60 is early. And I sort of said, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. If you want to retire at 60, that's great. But why have you picked 60? It's about being that conscious to go that deep to be able to say, did I pick 60 because it's kind of close enough, but it just a little bit earlier? Or, if I could help them to retire at 40, why would you say yes? And they were like, yeah, is that even possible? So again, their mind had gone down as a sort of a societal norm there. And it's about working out, what they are and making sure that your answers are your answers and not somebody else's.
I love that. I mean, I do the values exercise as well with some of my clients, and they've told me time and time again, like, even if we finish work like a couple of years ago, they still revisit that exercise. They still use it as their compass. So yeah, anyone listening to this, it's not necessarily that complicated. Like you were saying, Laura, essentially finding your values is finding the things that really, really tap you into your inner core, either because you're pissed off or you're angry about something, or you're incredibly at ease, happy, thriving, whatever like sentiment you've got. If it's something like very heavy on that scale, one way or the other, means you're probably touching on like some of the values that are close to your heart. So yes, absolutely great exercise, great recommendation. The Get Rich, definitely love that. I haven't used this one, but I feel like even with people who are not necessarily having their business, just in general, I feel like it's a fantastic exercise, because there might be, like you were saying, a part of yourself was like, oh, I wish I could do this and that. But when you actually drill down, you're like, oh, well, actually, it doesn't matter that much anymore. Or I thought I would like X amount of money. Well, actually, with X amount, I'm absolutely fine. So yeah, I think it's very interesting.
Absolutely.
The one point that you've made that I thought it was important to circle back is what you were saying about making sure that the answers are yours and that you're not answering on the basis of someone. Because the one thing I've seen, and I'd love to have your input on this, is also when it comes to happiness and money, because I know it's today's theme, your idea of what it would look like potentially 5 or 10 years ago when you studied your career or whenever what happened into your life, it's probably not the same as now. So I feel like it's also important to reflect on the fact that you evolve over time, and therefore your expectation about what makes you happy and the way money plays a role into this or not can actually evolve as well. Have you seen that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I think this is really important when it comes to purpose as well, because I know there's been loads of stuff about purpose, online recently, and loads of people have been sort of talking about finding their purpose. And for some people, it's easier than others. And for those that find it that little bit harder, I think one of the things that sort of adds to the pressure is this idea that once you found your purpose, there's going to be this big kind of moment where you're like, oh, and we suddenly know it all, and that's it. Exactly. But it has to last forever as well. It's like, we don't know what we're going to be like in 5-10 years time, and if your purpose changes, then great. I tend to find that the purpose will sort of, if it's a true purpose, it's very unusual for a purpose to sort of go from one end of the spectrum completely to the other, but there's no reason as to why it can't change. And you don't have to feel like by deciding your purpose now, that's it for life. That has to be, your overarching reason that you do everything. It might change, but again, it's about being conscious enough to ask that question. And if you start getting frustrated with something, step back and ask yourself, well, why am I getting frustrated, and where's the frustration coming from? And you might find that one of your values has changed. You might find that your purpose is slightly different now, and so you go on and you do something completely different. That's absolutely fine. But I think one of the fact that people sort of stumble on that is almost a reason for people to not start things, because they're like, oh, if I start this, what if I find out that it's the wrong thing, and then I've got to start all over again, and et cetera, and so you just don't really get very far. And it might not necessarily just be business. It could be, you might want to volunteer, you might want to spend more time with your family, you might want to travel and see the world instead of work, whatever it may be, that's fine. But you don't have to wait for this big aha moment and feel like you're committed forever.
Yeah, I love that. And just to build on what you were saying, essentially it's about not keeping it at surface level. Like you were saying, sometimes when people stumble across the fact that they don't feel necessarily misaligned, they're just afraid to look. Like you were saying, it's giving them a reason to almost look at the other direction and be like, not sure where this is going to take me. But actually, if you face this, whatever it is, your relationship with money, or like you were saying, the evolution of your purpose, or feeling misaligned potentially because of one or two values, well, you owe it to yourself, essentially. I mean, I always say life is too short to feel unfulfilled at work. But first of all, life is too short for anything to be lost in terms of time. But yeah, life is too short to actually keep it surface. Like, you have to dive deep. You have to be ready to face whatever is underneath the surface, because essentially this is the best gift that you can give to yourself, to whoever is around you. And essentially, like you were saying, it's going to get you closer to the real answer of finding your purpose, which might evolve, and that's okay. But at least you would have that. It's almost like a direct line that you've got, it's like the red phone on whoever's president desk, of like the real line with yourself, whoever that is, your heart, your brain, whatever that is, direct line that is actually open, that you can easily, connect with, and you can actually think like, am I actually still aligned there? So yeah, I love keeping an eye on the time. We've got 5 minutes left. As usual, these things just flew by. I know. So obviously you mentioned the values exercise. You've mentioned I'm calling it the Get Rich, but you didn't say Get Rich, did you?
Rich Life. That's what I call it. It's Rich Life exercise. Yeah.
There we go. So we've got those two already that you've shared. Any other recommendations for anyone who is struggling with the whole money, happiness, balance in their life kind of thing?
I think definitely those two are the most important ones, especially especially with the happiness money question. Because I think that the difficulty is when you are so fixated on money, and it's very easy to be fixated on money when you're, in the early stages, because of course, until you have enough to cover your basic needs, this is my business degree coming out now, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's the basics at the very bottom, and yeah, exactly. And unless you cover that and you can, pay your rent and feed yourself, then it's really hard to not think about money. It's really hard. So it's the forefront of your brain. But I think knowing what makes you happy and doing exercises like that, but also doing, maybe looking at limiting beliefs as well, because that can be a really big one. And a lot of people have limiting beliefs around money for a start, but also a lot of people have limiting beliefs around happiness. Sometimes it's, the amount of times I've been told in my previous life, to be fair, not really in what I'm doing at the minute, but that a job isn't about being happy. A job is about, money, but happiness is what you do on the weekend and in the evening. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. But I know a lot of people that still talk that way. And a lot of people that say that happiness is not necessarily something for them, or maybe they've had a tragedy, or they've had something that has happened to them, and ultimately it's a decision that has been made subconsciously, where they've said, well, that's awful and I can't be happy. And so delving deep, giving yourself the space. This is why I love coaching, because it gives yourself some space, and it gives yourself somebody to ask you some slightly deeper questions, so that you can go in and try to work out, what is happiness to me? Do I deserve it? And the answer is always yes, but understanding how to sort of break those barriers that you might have, when it comes to the topic of happiness, so that you can truly understand and accept that you are destined to be happy. You are allowed to be happy. Again, like I say, what does that mean? It might be business for you. It might be something else. It might be family. It might be traveling. It might be, volunteering. But whatever it means, making sure that it's completely true to you. So working on those limiting beliefs. And again, if you have limiting beliefs on money, so many people, I very, very rarely find somebody that doesn't have a limiting belief somewhere around money. And I, for one, definitely have got a couple, and I've been working on them for years, and they can take a little while to disappear. But yeah, unless you do the work, it's not going to go anywhere, is it?
It doesn't. Well, I don't think there is a better way to finish. So there we go. You got it, everybody. Just, do the work, go deep, make sure that you're honest with yourself. Those quick exercise, the values, Rich Life, definitely some practical things as well that you've mentioned. Thank you so much for being here today, Laura.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. I've loved it.
It's a pleasure.